we go. So thank you for coming. You're all very welcome. I'll just begin by giving a little bit of an overview of the Creative Europe desk itself and the work that we do in the Creative Europe program. And then I'll kind of go further into the Culture Moves Europe call specifically. And then we'll hear from Elinor. Then I have some other kind of resources that I'll go through, and then we have time for questions. So I'll get going because we have quite a good bit to get through. So just the structure of the desk itself is that we're the national contact point for the Creative Europe program. So we have 3 offices. So we have 2 media offices, one in Dublin, one in Galway. And then we have the culture one, which is in the Arts Council. So we're hosted by the Arts Council. And then, so what we do at the Culture Office is we give information, advice and assistance to Irish applicants to Creative Europe programmes. We also promote the programme at a local, regional and national level. We collaborate with key sectorial stakeholders and agencies, and we work closely with the Creative Europe Desk Network, which is our the other Creative Europe desks in different countries, in different Creative Europe countries. We also assist with partner searches, and we do cross-sectorial partnerships and events with the media office. So to kind of get into the kind of policy background, so why the EU funds culture, obviously there's the intrinsic value of culture to society and like art for art's sake, but then there's also things like treaty commitments. And then there's like a broader EU policy that informs the way that culture is funded. And these kind of will come up in the calls. So they will like influence the calls in some ways. So for example, like the European Green Deal would like influence the sustainability aspects of the Culture Moves Europe call. So it's kind of good to be at least a little bit aware of how of maybe like an overview of each of these policies. It's helpful to understand the context. So the Creative Europe programme is the EU flagship programme supporting the cultural and creative sectors. We're currently in the cycle of 2021 to 2027, which has an overall budget of 2.44 billion. And Creative Europe invests in actions that reinforce cultural diversity and respond to the needs and challenges of the cultural and creative sectors. And this is just an overview of the funding programme. So we can see the breakdown of the media, culture, media, and cross-sector. Whoops. Sorry, just go back a bit. So in terms of the sectors, so we have, these are the sectors covered by the culture strand in Creative Europe. So we have a wide range of cultural and creative sectors, including, among others, architecture, cultural heritage, design and visual art, literature and publishing, music and performing arts. So it is quite broad. It's broader than like kind of than like the Arts Act, which ran the Arts Council, because you can see there that has like heritage and design in it as well. So then in terms of the priorities under culture, we have resilience and recovery, innovation and joint creation, cooperation and exchange of practices, key players and multipliers, and capacity building of artists. And then the funding strands under Creative Europe, this is just some examples of them. And this is the one that we're going to focus on today, which is Culture Moves Europe. So what is Culture Moves Europe? So it promotes cultural and artistic mobility across the 40 Creative Europe countries by supporting individual mobility and residency projects. It covers the sectors of architecture, cultural heritage, design, fashion design, literature, music, performing arts and visual arts. So the same sectors that I mentioned earlier that fall under the culture strand. And so the audiovisual sector is not supported through Culture Moves Europe, but if your project fits into one of the eligible sectors and contains some audiovisual elements, you can still apply. For example, if you work in visual art, but you're making an artist film, that's totally fine. But it's more if it's like, if you're producing something purely for like television, or it's more of a kind of commercial project. And then Culture Moves Europe is funded by the European Union, but it's managed by the Goethe Institute. So who's it for? So it's for individual artists or cultural professionals. They have to be at least 18 years old, and you're based in one of the 40 Creative Europe countries. So that's wider than the nation states, regardless of nationality. So it's where you're legally resident rather than what your nationality is. And then so you can apply as an individual artist or a cultural professional, or you can also apply as a group. So you can apply as a group of maximum 5 artists or cultural professionals. So it's open to all levels of experience and educational background, but the applicant must be active in an eligible sector. And you must have a mobility project, which includes 3 elements. So 1 international partner, 1 project, and 1 destination. So to go a little bit further into that, so what do you need to apply? So you need to have 1 mobility project, which is to be carried out in another Creative Europe country. So you're going from 1 Creative Europe country to another, and with the support of an international partner. So in the application form, you'll be asked for a short description of your project, why the mobility is important, etc. And then, so you need 1 mobility project, 1 international partner. So that's someone who collaborates with you during the project implementation in the destination country. And then you also have these supporting documents that you need to upload. So your sort of ID, your proof of residence, CV, a portfolio, and your letter of invitation. And then there's information there about what you need to have on the letter of invitation from the international partner. And then just also a note to say it's always good to leave enough time to prepare the supporting documents. Like maybe you might start with that. And also you want to leave your international partner with enough time to prepare the letter of invitation. So it's good to start preparing the supporting documents quite early. So who is the international partner? So the international partner is a person or an organization you will collaborate with during your project implementation. So it could be another artist, could be a curator, a museum, a festival, a venue, an institution. In terms of educational institutions, they can be international partners, but only if your project doesn't contribute to a formal learning program, like university studies or vocational training. So they could be like a research partner, perhaps, but just not like in a formal learning program. So things to make sure of. Your international partner has to be relevant for the objectives of your project. So do they kind of fit into your practice or the project that you're trying to undertake? Is there a good fit there in terms of the skills you might learn or the experiences you might have? So good to kind of pick your international partner quite carefully. And they also must be based in a Creative Europe country as well, but a different one to where you reside. So you wouldn't be able to do, if you're based in Dublin, you wouldn't be able to do a residency in Cork. It would have to be in a different Creative Europe country. And then just a couple of caveats there in terms of you want the projects can't be related to formal education, as I mentioned earlier, and then it also can't be just for the presentation of works. So it wouldn't be like you're doing an exhibition abroad and you need funding for that. This is more about the development of work. Yeah. So in terms of the grant amount, it varies from person to person in terms of their circumstances, in terms of how long they're traveling for and how they travel. So you have a daily allowance of €85 for each day of project implementation. So project implementation is how long you're there at the residency with the partner or the, conducting your activities with the partner institution. So that's not the travel time, that's just while you're there. So this contributes to accommodation, food, equipment, local transport, and the project duration should be justified in relation to the project activities. And then your travel allowance is 400 or 800, depending on how far you're going. And then there's also top-ups for green mobility. So if you don't travel by airplane, you have an additional top-up for that. So for example, you might be getting a ferry from Dublin to Holyhead, for example, and then getting a train to mainland Europe, and then getting more trains from there. So yeah, and then you get a top up to accommodate that. And then there's also other things that kind of take into account people's circumstances. So you can get a family top up for dependent children under 18. There's also like an overseas territory top up, one for a visa, and then accessibility support and sign language interpreters as well. Yeah, so here we have the objectives. So there's 4 objectives in total, but you need to just pick 2. So the objectives are to explore, so to conduct creative and artistic research, investigate, draw inspiration, and work on a specific theme or a new concept. To engage, so to engage in a creative process, seeking to produce a new piece of artistic or cultural work. Learn, so to enhance competencies and skills, for example, through collaboration with a specialist. Or to connect, so developing a professional network to strengthen professional development and to engage with new audiences. Then the criteria, so the things that the assessor will be looking at. So project relevance. So does the project allow you to pursue the 2 objectives? So just going back to the 2 objectives there, you choose 2. And yeah, to just make sure that the project allows you to undertake or like to engage in the 2 objectives. Preparation, is the mobility well planned? Have you thought out how you're going to get from A to B? And then for groups, does each group member have a clear role? That's something that you might decide quite early on as well. Then we have the outcome. So what will be the longer term outcome of your project? So what's the impacts or benefits on your career or to the local community? And then we have mobility relevance. So are the travel and duration necessary to achieve the desired outcomes? So is it necessary for you to travel to this particular place? And just sort of making the case for why you should go to this particular place. And then there's sustainability. So like I mentioned earlier with the key kind of policy things, policy objectives that tie in with the end up kind of in the guidelines for different things. So does your project consider environmental sustainability, for example, like the topic or the materials used? And then just the timeline before applying. So you need to plan your project. So you need to apply to open calls for residencies, reach out to potential partners, kind of do a lot of planning and thinking and researching about who you might like to collaborate with. If you're applying as a group, you need to nominate a group coordinator. So someone who takes the lead on the sort of application itself and the kind of some of the admin around that. Then the call is open, so generally autumn to spring, rolling deadlines at the end of each month. So you can only apply to one monthly deadline, but they'll be open for quite a while. So currently they're open till April. And it's better to apply at least 4 months before your project starts, and you'll get notification of your results approximately 6 to 8 weeks after the monthly deadline. I would also recommend applying to one of the earlier calls, because the April one, kind of naturally, a lot of people end up applying to that one. So it's kind of best to apply to the earlier deadlines if that's possible. And then you need to make your application. So make sure you allow time to read the call document. That's very important. And to make the application itself. Excuse me. Then you submit the application form on the Go application portal. So then after applying, so after signing the grant agreement, you'll have up to 6 months to start your travel. So you depart from your place of residence. You implement your project in the destination country for the agreed duration, and you can't interrupt your project and restart it later. So you need to do it all in one go. In terms of the duration, you can decide the duration based on your project's needs and objectives. So from individual projects, it could be anything from a week to like 2 months, basically, from 7 to 60 days. And then for groups, it's from 7 to 21 days. And the project duration is considered as the number of days that you're there implementing the project. So then afterwards, then you submit the activity report. So that's within 30 days of finishing your project, and you must submit your activity report to receive your final payment. So the deadline's coming up. There's no deadline in December, but there is one in January, February, March, and April. And we kind of would expect similar, roughly maybe similar deadlines next year. Generally, the call opens in autumn and ends in spring. And now I'm going to hand over to Elinor O'Donovan, who's an artist that's going to talk to us about her residency and fish factory in Iceland. So thank you, Elinor.
Lucy. Hi everyone. I'm just going to share my slides now just to get that up and running. So hopefully you can see my screen, and it's got a picture of the street sign for Stöðvarfjörður, which is the town in Iceland that I spent a month on residency in April 2023. So I guess with this presentation, it's just going to be very quick, but just hopefully by the end of it will make you feel like, oh, this is a bit more accessible, or I can see now how someone has done this. I feel like I can now do this myself. So just a bit about me. I'm a visual artist from Cork, and I'm now based in Dublin, and I work across sort of film, installation, digital media. The work that I make is sort of exploring knowledge, memory, and I would say the blurriness between fact and fiction. And then that photo there is a still from an upcoming film called Metamorphosis, which will be shown in Cork in January at Serious Arts Centre. So if you're around, please call in. Little shameless plug at the start. So I'll jump right into the residency. So in April 2023, I went to Iceland to undertake a residency at the fish factory in Stöðvarfjörður, which was supported by the Culture Moves Europe Individual Mobility Award. The purpose of the residency was to complete a film that I had underway called The Immeasurable Grief of the Prawn. And then I also spent time in Reykjavik researching various galleries. So the image on the left there is the fish factory residency site. And then just to give you an indication of where it is in Iceland, it's at the red pin on that map of Iceland. So it's very remote. Reykjavik is on the west coast. This small town, Stöðvarfjörður, is on the east coast of Iceland. So I guess to give you a sense of how things worked for me is that so before I even knew about Culture Moves Europe, I was planning on doing this residency. So I applied for it in July 2022, and excuse me, that same month I was also accepted to the residency. The fish factory in particular don't do like sort of once a year open calls. They kind of have rolling applications that you can make at any time of year. So I applied, I was accepted, and then I paid the initial residency deposit. Then by December 2022, I had heard about the Culture Moves Europe individual mobility program, and I made my application in December 2022. I believe actually that year was maybe, excuse me, the first time that they had done the individual mobility awards from Culture Moves Europe. So I think I was among the first people to apply for that award. So then in February 2023, I found out that I was receiving the funding from Culture Moves Europe. And then I paid the residency balance to the fish factory in Iceland. So it was, as Lucy was saying, it's about 2 months after I applied in the first place. Also, just yeah, to note, I was able to apply in December 2022, but obviously this year, there's no deadline in December 2025. So in March 2023, I was able to draw down 75% of the total funding. So the total amount I got was 2,975. I'll break that down in the next slide of how that worked out. And then in April 2023, I actually went to Iceland. I did the residency. May 2023, I came back from Iceland. I completed the post-residency report, which they, as they say, they want it within 30 days of you finishing the activity. And then just to point out, it took a long time for me to get the final 25% of funding. I imagine that that is an issue that will have been solved by now. That was maybe just among the reasons that I was, among the first people who were receiving this individual mobility funding, and they were maybe ironing out the kinks in the system. But it took, yeah, about 5 months from filling in the report to actually receiving the last 25%. But just to flag that that happened. So, so in terms of finance, the amounts will have changed a little bit in terms of the Culture Moves Europe. But in 2023, so what I spent, the residency fee was about €700. My flights, travel, and accommodation to get to Iceland and also to stay for a few days in Reykjavik at the end of the residency was about €1,100, I estimate. And then also while I was there, I was paying for groceries, materials, etc. I can't give you an estimate of how much I spent, but that was a minimum €1,800 for the residency fee and the flights and accommodation. And I had been willing to spend that myself, I guess, before I applied for the Culture Moves Europe funding. But then getting the Culture Moves Europe funding in 2023, it was €75 a day stipend, and I was away for 35 days. So that's the €2,625. Now it's €85 a day. And then I got a travel top up because I was traveling greater than, I think, 600-kilometer distance. I didn't get a green travel top up because it was impossible to really do green travel between Ireland and Iceland. The most efficient way was to fly. Otherwise, you'd have to do a ferry to the UK, train to mainland Europe, and then get the ferry somehow from Denmark to Iceland. It just made more sense to get the airplane. So total income then was 2,975. So I'm going to go through the actual application that I wrote on the Gutha portal just to give you an idea of how I was kind of structuring my proposal. So the first prompt is, please give a summary of the content of your project, the expected results, the people you will work with, and your expected audience if applicable. So I said, I'm an emerging multidisciplinary artist from Ireland, traveling to Iceland for a residency at the fish factory Stöðvarfjörður in East Iceland in April 2023. There I will spend 4 weeks completing my first artist film, The Immeasurable Grief of the Prawn, while responding to the unique landscape of the Icelandic coastline. The film is about how memory affects knowledge and takes place over 3 locations, a dinner table, a pub, and the seafloor. The dinner table and pub scenes will be filmed in Ireland, but I will use the time at Fish Factory to edit and compile them. In Iceland, I will film the seafloor scene in the landscape near the water, responding to Iceland's unique geographic features. I'll take advantage of Fish Factory's recording studio to record Foley sounds for the film. I intend to have the film edited and compiled by the end of the residency. The resulting film will be presented in a solo exhibition at Generator Projects Dundee, UK in July 2023. So just to sort of point out that what was important there was the who, what, when, where, why. So who I am, what I'm doing, when, where, and why is it relevant or important, and just as a summary. Okay, the relevance of the mobility. So explain how the mobility will allow you to achieve the objective you chose above, to learn, to create, to connect, to explore, why it's important that you travel and that you stay in the destination for the requested duration in order to achieve the objective. So when I applied, you only had to select one objective of the to learn, to create, to connect, to explore. So I selected to learn, which they had sort of said, if you're doing a residency, maybe to learn is relevant. So, but then obviously if you're applying now, you'll have to select 2 objectives and kind of justify them. So I said, the mobility will allow me to explore Iceland's unique geographical features, such as glaciers and volcanic beaches, and create a new film work which responds to these features. In the climax point of the film, a prawn on the seafloor grieves for all the other prawns which have been eaten over dinner conversation, performing a dramatic funerary ritual dance. In Iceland, I will choreograph and perform this dance for the film, responding to the landscape. I will research Icelandic artists who use performance in their work, such as Ragnar Kjartansson, to inform how I approach its staging. As the Icelandic landscape is so unique, this research could not be done remotely, and using the rare geological features as a background will give the film's locations an otherworldly quality that I would not similarly be able to capture in Ireland. 35 days gives me enough time to complete my residency with the fish factory and to spend a few days researching, visiting contemporary art spaces in Reykjavik. And then there's a picture of Ragnar Gartensen, just for reference. So yeah, so I was kind of justifying why Iceland, why me, why this specific place. So the organization and the preparation. So what steps have you undertaken so far to prepare your project? So I wrote in January 2023, I'll shoot the scenes for the film set in Ireland. In February to March 2023, I'll construct the costumes and props needed for filming in Stöðvarfjörður. In April, I will bring my Canon DSLR camera, lenses, tripods, and basic photography equipment with me to Iceland. The 4-week residency will take place at Fish Factory Stöðvarfjörður, where I am provided with a working studio space and accommodation. I've paid the residency fee and have received confirmation from the organization. My project during this residency will be self-directed, though I expect to benefit from the expertise of the staff at Fish Factory and other artists in residency in Stöðvarfjörður. And then I gave a sort of outline of what I was going to do while I was there. So week 1, shooting outdoors in the landscape, choreographing a piece in response to the setting. Week 2, film the final piece, begin the final edit. Week 3, record any additional sounds and Foley. Week 4, finish editing, mastering the film. Week 5, conduct research for future projects by visiting contemporary galleries in Reykjavik. I'll also just flag now, I'm sort of saying what I will do. In reality, when I went to Iceland, the plan kind of changed a little bit just from how the film was developing. And so when I was submitting the report afterwards, I just kind of had to detail, this is what I did, this is what I said I would do, this is how things changed, but it still kind of fulfilled the objectives. And then the expected longer term outcome, they ask, what do you expect as the longer term outcomes? And I said, the main outcome of this project is to complete my first short film, which will be shown in a solo show in Generator Projects Dundee in July 2023. I anticipate that working in Iceland will provide me with new ways of thinking about the interaction between landscape and the movement of characters in cinematography. The focused time spent in Iceland will allow me to hone my skills in film shooting, editing, and sound mixing, which will be useful for my practice in the future. I anticipate that I will make peer-to-peer connections with the other artists and residents at the Fish Factory, and I will gain useful critical feedback and advice on my work. By visiting contemporary galleries in Reykjavik, such as I8 Gallery, Bang, and Open, I will gain inspiration from a diverse Icelandic visual art scene and might integrate these alternative ways of thinking into my practice in Ireland. I hope that the film shown in Dundee will lead to future opportunities in Ireland, Iceland, and the UK. So if I was saying that my objective of the residency was to learn, I was kind of saying, this is how I will learn. These are the kind of benefits that will enhance my practice in the future by doing this particular residency. And then they also ask about the sustainability aspects. So because I was traveling by plane, I was trying to emphasize the other ways that I would be to integrating sustainable practices. So I said the costume and props required for the film will be constructed from recycled materials, including reused cardboard and paper. While it would be necessary to travel by air from Ireland to Iceland, in Iceland I will use public transport where possible, for example, to travel from Reykjavik to East Iceland and within East Iceland. The filming and editing process will produce zero waste as the process will be mostly digital. I already own all the equipment that I need for filming and editing process and will continue to reuse this equipment in my practice for future projects. While working in the landscape in Iceland, I will be extremely careful not to film in designated protected areas in order to conserve the geological formations and delicate ecosystems which exist there. I will take nothing but footage and leave nothing but footprints. Um, and then, so just to give you an overview, I guess, of what I actually did then. So that was my application. And then this is what happened. So I went to the residency in April 2023. There was 8 artists there, including people from Ireland, UK, China, Canada, and the US. And we were all there together. There was ceramic artists, people who were using printmaking, woodworking, music recording. And the Fish Factory residency has all of the facilities to support that. So I had a brilliant time there. And there's also an in-house coffee roastery, which was extremely convenient. But it was really beautiful. Yeah, East Iceland, I really recommend this particular residency just because it was really lovely. So I shot and filmed so I actually shot the entire film in Ireland. So my plans had changed from when I submitted the application to when I actually went to Iceland. So actually, when I was doing this residency in Iceland, you can see my computer screen behind me in this picture. This is the kind of my studio space in the shared studios. I spent the whole time actually editing this film. So it took about 30 days to edit the film. And then the picture on the right is a still from the film, The Immeasurable Grief of the Prawn. So that was one thing. But then because I had said I wanted to respond to the sort of unique geological features in Iceland, I filmed and made another film while I was there called Wild Geese to Wilder Geese, which was filmed around the landscape around Stöðvarfjörður. And then I used a green screen technique, I guess, to put my eyes and mouth onto these sort of geological features. So that was kind of me being able to fulfill the objectives that I said I would do when I was there. Also, just it was a really brilliant residency. The other artists were lovely. We had a great time. We all left with tattoos, which is hopefully indicative of the fact that it was really good and we enjoyed it so much. We wanted to immortalize it on ourselves. And then at the end of the residency, I spent 5 days in Reykjavik, and so I visited art galleries. There was a design festival on at the time, so I went to kind of different spaces and just got to go and sort of experience the art scene in Reykjavik, which was really beneficial. So those are pictures from Reykjavik. So the outcome, I made the film, The Immeasurable Boogie for the Prawn, and that film and the accompanying exhibition opened in July 2023 at Generator Projects in Dundee. So this image here is an installation view of the exhibition, and then the film was shown in a separate room to this room. These are stills from the film that was edited while I was in Iceland. So I did a lot of the all of the editing while I was there. Um, and so, yeah, so that was the kind of results of my residency. I'll give you some just very quick tips. So yeah, when writing the proposal, do answer the who, what, when, where, why. So who are you? What do you want to do? When do you want to do it? Where? And why is that important and relevant to you? I get this advice a lot, but mirror the language of the guidelines back in your proposal. So read through the guideline document, which is really clear and really comprehensive. But if they say, if they're expanding on what does it mean to learn, to create, that kind of thing, take that language and then recycle it in your application. Yeah, be realistic with the timeline and check the guidelines. So as Lucy said, maybe apply at least 4 months in advance. And I would also recommend applying early. So I applied for the monthly rolling deadline in December. I guess the logic with that as well is if there's a finite amount of money that can be allocated to artists, if you have a fundable application and you applied in one of the earlier rounds of the Culture Moves Europe deadlines, you're probably more likely to get it versus when some of that money will have already been allocated by the time you're applying for the later deadlines. And so they might just be, even if you have a fundable application, they might just have to be a bit more selective. So you're giving yourself a better shot, I think, if you apply earlier. If you do get funded, take loads of photos and keep evidence. So in the report that you fulfill afterwards, you have to show like photos that you took or like social media posts just to show that you were there and that you were doing the thing that you said you would do. And then always good advice for artists. If you do get funding, practice gratitude. So that image is like a screenshot of an Instagram post that I did when I found out that I got the funding. I did up a picture with the funders' logos on it just to practice saying, hey, this is great. And also, you get to celebrate yourself and be like, aren't I fantastic that I got this funding? And then the funders like to see it as well because they want everyone to, apply for and get the money if they can get it. So that's me. I'll stop sharing there now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
That was brilliant. It was really generous. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, so I just have a few more things to talk about. Let's just continue with that. So, thank you again, Elinor. So, just in terms of mobility opportunities, so how to kind of find them, that can be a little bit intimidating if you've not done a residency before. So just to give a little bit further context, so On the Move is a really good resource for learning about how to do mobility opportunities, but then also to find them. So I would really recommend this as a resource if you're planning on undertaking one. We also have, I suppose research is a really important element of it. So researching international partners specific to your practice. So maybe particularly if you're working with an individual and it's very skills based, like there might be someone in particular in a different country that like you really want to learn from. And that can be very particular to your sector and your practice. So then the other thing would be arts organizations. So subscribing to the newsletters or following on social media, arts organizations that do residencies or do work that you admire. So it can be good to keep an eye on them and see if they're kind of open to international collaboration in some particular way. And resource organizations, so we have the VAI International Opportunities section is very good. They'll kind of post information about residencies and different international opportunities. On the Move, which I mentioned, and then there's also, this is another residency database, which is also very useful for finding information. I can circulate this with this PowerPoint with his links in it. The other thing then would be networks. So international networks can be a really good way of like finding information about residency. So an example for myself within my own practice would be like film labs, where I knew that I wanted to do a residency in like analog filmmaking. And then I found an international network of sort of analog DIY film labs. And so I looked on their website and found one that was open at the time and applied for it and did the residency. So it can be very beneficial to look at international networks in your particular sector and see if the partner organizations are open to international collaboration or run residencies. And then also another really important thing is your peer and professional network. So if like a friend of yours or a sort of someone in your professional network has done a residency, it can be really useful to ask them how it went, how they funded it, where they went and what their experience was, if they have any advice. So, and even do feel free to reach out to me as well if you have any questions. So just to cover some further funding resources. So I mentioned earlier that the Culture Moves Europe grant is not specifically for the presentation of completed work. It can involve like an element of that, but that's not the sole focus. So just to say that what I would recommend to people when they're when that's what they're trying to do is show like a presentation of completed work is to apply to Culture Ireland, because it's within their remit to promote Irish arts worldwide. Then we also have the Arts Council. So there's an international policy within the Arts Council that's across the organisation. So the funding schemes within the Arts Council for individuals can be used as part of like a wider developmental project. So you might have like an international element of a bursary award or an international element of a project or agility award. And then there's the Northern European Mobility Opportunity, which my team has been working on, which ran in 2025. And I think we're hoping it will continue next year. And it's basically for artists from Ireland or the UK to travel to a Nordic country. So you could, if you're based in Ireland, you could travel to a Nordic country. You couldn't travel to the UK directly, but you can travel to a Nordic country or vice versa. Someone from a Nordic country could travel to Ireland to collaborate with you or with your organisation. So that's pretty much it. Do stay in touch with us. We have a YouTube channel where we'll like post all of our webinars, so you can watch back on things there. We also have a newsletter which is very active, and I would really recommend subscribing to that. Then we also have social media, so we have one for culture and one for media, across lots of different platforms. So now we're on to questions. Also, my email address is down the bottom there. So if you want to get in touch with me directly, you're very welcome to.